I'm in the big leagues, told her don't miss me. Ballin' like Houston, ayy, feeling like Whitney. I need a bag, bruh, send it through quickly. I'm making his dog, like I'm in the big leagues. Told him that I gotta go, dog.
Welcome back to another episode of CED Connects. I'm your host, Danny, and I'm here with Stephen J. What up, my man?
What's up, Danny?
And we're here, man. Cannabis Entrepreneurial Dialogues. Our mission is to create spaces for people of color, brands of color, and minorities in the space to be able to educate and empower our communities through storytelling and experiences. We're here at the American Cholo Studios in North Hollywood.
Whoop, whoop.
And back to season 4, we have a special guest in the house. We have Angie with Encore. What up, Angie?
What's up, y'all? Thanks
What
for
up,
having
Angie?
me. Stoked to be here.
Yeah, man, we're excited to have you. For those watching for the first time, thank you guys for tuning in. For those returning, thank you guys for coming back. Make sure to like, subscribe to American Cholo Studios or American Cholo and CED Connects. Follow us on Instagram at CED_Connects for more input with all the episodes that are coming out. But I'm excited about today. As you guys have seen with these past episodes, we have new segments. We're going to start with current events. Steven, what we got on the current events today?
I am just, I threw an event with John B.
Ooh, John B. I haven't
Came
heard
back
that
out of
name.
retirement. It
Sheesh.
was a dope party. We had smoke, edibles, intimate music, intimate experience. I was shooting it, and I was like 10 feet away from John B the entire time. So it was cool.
Did he play like all the like old hits like with the
He
Tupac
played like a
songs
few
and stuff?
old hits, some new stuff, but overall, great night, very successful. K-Day covered like the recap.
That makes sense, K-Day.
Yeah. It was dope. Sheen magazine, so that was up for me. It was a
Nice.
great event. Shout out
Okay.
everyone who made it happen on the team.
What team is that?
Glasshouse team. Marketing team. Marketing.
All right. Any other current events? Nothing right now? All right, cool. Ooh, yes.
Like events that we went to?
Yeah, you've experienced something that's on your mind coming
Oh,
forward.
yeah. Okay. Well, we did. We recently sponsored the NCIA's Summit Mixer. So it was a National
Nice.
Cannabis Industry Alliance Summit Mixer.
That was in Sacramento?
Yeah, up in Sacramento. So
Alright.
Carl and I drove all the way up there. It was pretty cool to see.
All the cows.
Yeah. All the cows. It was sick. I love Kalinga. It smells amazing.
I bet it does.
Yeah, but it was cool to be able to network with just like Oaksterdam and just a bunch of pretty dope organizations out there.
Was there like a panel and stuff going on?
Yeah, they
and
had a
stuff?
really cool panel. They just talked about the state of the cannabis industry and the steps that we need to take to be able to change how everything is going. So it was cool. It was refreshing to be able to have just like a candid panel of people, of operators in the space talking about the disparity between the regulations on like hemp and recreational cannabis and how much people are spending money to be able to be compliant versus the people who are doing hemp, Delta 8, and all these other isomers, not spending the money and putting out unsafe products. So it was cool. From a testing standpoint, I was like, oh my gosh, this is juicy.
And that's important, and I think that's great for our audience because people don't realize that there is cannabis that is tested and has regulations, and then there's hemp that has zero regulations and is often sprayed with chemicals, often sprayed with fake terpenes, a bunch of shit that's just bad for you, on top of like the vapes and the concentrates. So hemp versus cannabis, very important. Check it out. I'm glad we're talking about it.
Nice. All right. Now we got that market report that we have going on, which from what I've heard, it seems to be a big hit. A lot of people are excited about this new market report.
Because no one
segment.
talks about the numbers. This
Yeah.
is information that we're giving to the viewers, that it happens in closed doors conversations because it's business. This isn't something that's really advertised. So let's get
Yeah.
into the market report. Danny.
Yeah, and the way I see it is like the stock market. Numbers are constantly fluctuating.
Volatile.
And so I think it's like I said, it's also important to do that. But I have some numbers from SoCal Dank. They're a cultivation out of Montebello. They decided shout out to you guys. But they went ahead and they gave us their pricing on what their bulk pricing looks like, and so they shot out their bigs are about $12.50. They're an indoor cultivation. I want
So for indoor bigs.
indoor flower bigs, they're pricing it at $12.50, $1,250 a pound. Their mediums go for 950 to 1,000, and their smalls range from 750 to 850.
Whoa, wait up. Let's clarify something. So there's
Yeah.
smalls, mediums, and bigs.
Yeah.
Why are there 3 different levels if it's the same plant?
So from the plant, there's multiple different nugs that come out, and they're used for different form factors. So for those that are looking to make pre-rolls, for example, you're gonna want those smalls because it's easier to grind up. It's easier to make the materials that's needed to make those pre-rolls. And then the bigs, of course, are what you're gonna typically see that's packaged in the jars or in the mylar bags and whatnot. And so
So bigs, where are bigs typically found on the plant? The bottom of the plant, middle of the plant, top of the plant,
let's say middle and top.
middle and top.
Middle and
So the
top.
big nugs are what gets a lot of the nutrients from the lights, where the smalls are typically at the bottom of the plant, not necessarily getting as much nutrients from the light as possible. So that's the reason why there's difference. And in my opinion, if it's good indoor flower, smalls are as good as bigs, but everyone will argue. I'm going to grind it up anyways, so that's why.
Yeah,
That's
Cool.
typically
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, no, for sure. Go ahead. Angie.
Typically, we see like in testing, the bigs will test higher than a lot of the smalls. So that's a really common thing. Is the results really speak for the quality of the flower?
So the big ones are a little bit higher in quality. Cool.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually. But potency doesn't matter, right?
Potency doesn't matter.
Potency does
Goddamn
the
terps.
number. We'll get
Goddamn
into that.
terps.
We'll definitely get into that. They also wanted to bring up that trim prices are also up. Their trim
Ah.
prices are anywhere between $15 to $25 per pound. And the trim, for those that don't know, is that's the process of trimming the plant. It's filled with a bunch of leaves around the bud, and so there's trimming teams that will trim it to manicure the plant and make it look as nice as it does for the consumer, that once they reach that the product ready to serve, right? But those trimmings, some people toss them, some people sell it because you need that product to be able to make other products such as edibles, such as distillate. And distillate prices are also on the rise because of the shortage of trim. And so I've seen that distillate prices now are up to about $1,350 to $1,500 a liter.
Ooh.
And so that's
Nice.
up
Nice
there.
for the manufacturers.
It is. It is. I mean, yeah. I guess because the cost isn't as much to make. I mean, but the overhead with everything, all things considered, you know, like I said, it's a fluctuating price, and so they're feeling great right now. But that's just that's just money that's being put on reserve, so that when the numbers start to dip, they still have that capital to be able to do what they need to do. And so that's important to know.
And how many liters would someone typically purchase at a time? Like with this market report, is someone going to buy like 1 to 2? Are they going to buy 100?
I think it just depends on the size of the company, right? Like smaller companies, a liter is sufficient enough to be able to produce a good amount of product for themselves, and depending on what product they're making as well, right? Like if they're making pens, maybe a liter or two might be needed. If they're making edibles, a liter is good enough to make a good amount of edibles.
Yeah.
So I think it's all dependent um on on the company that's purchasing it and what their output is.
On the business,
Yeah.
for sure.
Also, I know you had some pricing that you wanted to highlight.
I mean, it's not crazy. My whole focus is retail. That's what I do. So I went and did some secret shopping, and I think these are deals that I actually picked up. So I went into Stizzy, my local Stizzy in Wilmington, and anyways, I picked up 7 grams out the door for $35.
7 grams.
7
of what?
grams of indoor flour out the
Dang.
door for $35. I am not mad at that deal at all.
What's the normal average price for something like that?
I
that
would
you
say for like
see?
indoor, right? Well, I mean, right now that is the average price, but it's obviously a lot cheaper because Stizzy's vertically integrated. But I would say like 7 grams safely, $50, 55, kind of. But you could also get like a really good eighth for 55 too. So depends. You're gonna change for quality for quantity a little bit, but that's just 7 grams. But I also went to the pottery in Mid City and I picked up 7 grams of greenhouse for $29 out the door.
Okay.
So 35 for
Nice.
indoor, 29 for outdoor. And then traditional, they're selling greenhouse as well for an eighth of greenhouse, $1.86 out the door.
Now, I don't want to confuse people because when Gil was here, we told him that
traditional
market,
traditional
okay.
dispensary in downtown. Sorry, so it's a legal recreational dispensary in downtown, named Traditional, and they sell their own house brand Astronauts Eighth for $8.86 out the door, which is crazy.
Dang.
Sub $9 eighth. That's what the legal
know
market
what?
is seeing.
If I do
Those are equivalent to trap numbers.
You know, if I do some digging, I might have their wholesale price.
It's probably like close to under 4, maybe 350 wholesale. Or is it cheaper than that?
I think it's a little more.
A little more. Yeah, it's like $4 essentially can give you a $10 eighth.
Yeah.
So
okay.
But yeah, that's just little retail.
Nice.
A little different.
Nice. So for those listening, if you're a retail out there, you guys want us to highlight your prices, hit us up, shoot us a DM, let us know what your prices look like, and we'll be more than happy to highlight those prices on this segment, man. So shout out to everyone that provided us with their prices.
Well, we got one more person who hasn't provided us with prices yet.
Oh, that's right.
Angie, what's testing going for?
Ooh.
Oh man, I guess it all depends on what you're looking to test. When we're talking about testing trim to usually process into, a lot of the times we see when people buy bulk trim, they're turning it into like a distillate or some type of concentrate. And a lot of times they'll do micro extraction. So they're essentially, we turn it into a crude and then we test it to see if there's any pesticide contaminants that would fail that batch from going into market. I would say it goes for about $325, but there are some different like promos and special partnership pricings available. But that would be our list price is $325. But people, they're typically testing for like a potency test, it's like $75. For pesticides, it's about like $225. It all depends on what they're testing and the intent of what they're buying for.
Okay, cool.
Can anyone just come in and test? Like, can a consumer say, "Hey, I want to test this," and will those prices be the same for a consumer versus someone that's doing it for their business?
License to license.
Yeah, yes, anyone can come in. We have a ton of people that just grow in their garage and they're just like, hey, like I grew this dank, like I want to see how potent it is. And so we'll test it. Personally, I don't think it's fair to give them that list pricing just because they don't use it for a business. And even if they do, it's not my business.
Sure.
But you know, I always try and just help out, just do like a home grower discount.
Okay.
Just because, you know, it's the roots of where we come from is, you know, growing in our closet, our garage. So I have mad respect for that kind of grassroots approach to it. So no, they don't typically pay like the standard list pricing. But if we have like companies that are doing testing and let's say they're doing high volume testing, they'll usually get a pretty good discount just because they send so much testing our way. It makes sense to help save them money.
This is a reminder that cannabis business is relationship based. You guys are partners, so awesome.
Nice. Anything else?
No, that sums up my market report.
All right, cool. So let's go ahead and let's get in this. Let's find out a little bit more about you, Angie.
Hey, let's do
The
it.
first time I met Angie, though, I want to say was I'll never forget this. We're at Hall of Flowers, and we're at the High 90s booth, and we're talking about me, Emily, and her. We're talking about parties, and she goes, "I got all the parties right here." And she started clicking her phone and changing all the flyers, and it blew my mind. And she goes, "Yeah, you just change it like there." So I changed my background, and now my puppies are my background, and I'll always thank her for that. But yeah, that was the first time I met Angie. Hall of Flowers.
Hall of Flowers.
Yeah, that was awesome. And it was funny because we ended up reconnecting later and then you're like, hey, remember me? You showed me how to do this. And I was like, oh my God, that's
Telling you,
right.
blew my mind.
I taught you something. Like we only talked for a little bit.
No, yeah, it was just, like I said, I just met you and then we dipped.
Nice.
So, yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
So where are you from, Angie?
I'm originally from a small military town called Bremerton, Washington. It's like across the sound or the lake from Seattle. And
Wait, what did you say it was called? The what?
The sound. Yeah, it's called the Puget Sound, but it's like a big old lake, I think. I think it's the terminology.
Okay.
But
never
we
heard
call
that.
it the Sound. Yeah, so it's just we would take like a ferry ride. So from my hometown, we would take like a giant ferry boat to Seattle. It takes about an hour. I used to go to school at the Art Institute out in Seattle, and I would take it every day. It was pretty cool. Sometimes, like if you're lucky, you'll see like I don't know, one time people have seen orcas. I haven't seen
Oh, that's
orcas,
sick.
but it's pretty cool.
Nice.
So it's not a lake because there's orcas. So just to clarify, I just got let me walk that one back.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah,
Salt water.
yeah, I'm from Washington, and I moved out here when I turned 21, and I really was excited about the thought of being like, oh, like weed is kind of legal out there. Like I could smoke weed, and I could just start a new life. And then eventually I got into cannabis, which was a dream come true, but it took like 5 years until that actually happened.
Okay. All right. And so, what year was it when you started to get into? What led you to where you're at right now?
Oh man, let's see.
Like, did you come into the space thinking like, hell yeah, I'm gonna go into this industry and I'm going straight to the lab?
No, not even. It's funny because like I'm the sales manager at the lab. And I don't have a science background. I went to art school, but I didn't finish my studies. So then I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I don't know. I'm gonna figure it out. And I'd always been in sales in one sales job or another. And I did like, I managed call centers. I, did like food gigs. But one day my friend Victoria, like, and we, we used to make wax together.
Oh shit.
Okay.
It was not safe. And this was before testing was a thing, but like, I was probably killing people's brain cells. It was terrible. But at the time, we were like, oh, we can make concentrates.
Hell yeah.
But we had always like kind of dabbled in, street pharmacy like things. But she was like, hey, like I just got this job at this weed lab. It's legit. We test weed. And I was like, oh, we test weed, huh?
Oh.
No, it was like we're like the most boring sector of the industry. But she was like, hey, I can get you an interview and I know you can get it just to make me look good. And I was like, okay. And my dream has always been to be involved in cannabis one way or another because the
Yeah.
first puff I ever had, I was like, how is this illegal? This is crazy. It brought like clarity and peace within such a busy mind and soul. And so, in college, I had always did all my studies around cannabis. I did like my like
In art
short
school?
films. Yeah.
What did you go to school for?
I went for a couple different things. I couldn't make up my mind. I went for
Yeah.
graphic design. I went for film.
Was there a culinary department at that art institute?
There was, but I was not part of it.
No, because I went to the art institute too. I went out here in Santa Monica.
Oh,
and
right on.
I made friends with all the culinary students because they hooked me up with all the food that they made.
Oh, it's amazing.
It was the best time
Loved
ever.
it. It was a cool. I loved going to the art institute. It was expensive as hell.
Yeah, it was.
And then that's why I left. But so then I was like, I'm gonna do something in cannabis. I don't know what it is. It's not legal, but I know like it's something. I'm gonna do something in it. And then when Victoria told me about the interview, I went and I just got so excited because not only am I doing something with cannabis, I wasn't being a bud tender, which I have been before. I've worked at deliveries before, but I was able to make, I think, a larger impact in the grand scheme of things to ensure safety. And that to me, I never thought about that being a part of like my journey, like, oh, make sure that weed is safe for everybody. But as I started to learn about it and learn about the industry, I was like, oh shit, like this is it. And so I started as a customer service rep, which is funny because before I did that interview, I was a department head for this like really big automotive group. And I was I think 25, and I led this department where everyone on the executive team was just an older white male. And so to be able to kind of break that stigma for myself was really exciting, but it still felt empty. And so eventually I decided, I'm making all this money, but I feel empty. Let me just take a shot and just do this weed testing thing.
Yeah.
And I went back down to minimum wage. It was very humbling because I had at the time a newborn, and I just made it work. And it was a struggle, but you can't replace experience. Like everything that I learned doing what I did, rising to the top is so valuable to me, and I wouldn't trade the journey for anything.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. You made 2 points that you carry all of your previous experience outside of cannabis to help make you successful inside. Because people think you have to start off as a bud tender and you have to work your way up. Granted, everyone has to work their way up from somewhere.
Hmm.
But even stepping in and entry space into a lab is a great way to just get your foot in the door and learn.
Yeah,
And you ended up having a great career. But
absolutely.
I identify with, you know, being excited to talk about safe weed because as someone who went to the trap shop all my life, I never realized that there were so many different chemicals that could be extremely harmful. So when I came into this space and everything was about buying legal, safe, buying tested, it's like, yeah, because it matters. And then people don't think that you're puffing on these Mario Karts and that they're good for you and that shit could possibly kill you. And then like the vitamin E scare. So no, it's not weird. I don't say at all. I think it's actually pretty cool because once you're educated on that there's safe product and there's bad product, it changes your perspective on a
Mm.
lot of things that you put in your body.
Yeah, most definitely. And I it's funny, like, because I moved out of state for a little while. I moved to Georgia, and to have that safe access cut from me for cannabis was jarring almost. It was just like, oh my gosh, like now I have to, it's like back in the day, I have to go find a plug and then meet him in his car. And it's kind of weird. But then, educating a bunch of people around me who don't know anything about recreational cannabis and they're just trying to get weed however they can, and seeing how, you know, misinformed they can be or how little they know about safe cannabis. Like someone was like, look at this weed, and it was like white, and I was like, that's mold, bro. That's crazy. Yeah. So it's interesting. I'm excited for, a more uh federal approach when it comes to safe access to cannabis. I think every state should have safe legal access to cannabis, because if we're all going to consume it, so we might as well make it safe.
That's true. Um, can you give us an example, or have you seen or experienced, you know, kind of to piggyback off of what Steven just brought up with, you don't know what you're that Mario Kart that you're puffing on. Have you seen or experienced a case where you seen test results that were just it wasn't there's maybe a 2% trace of THC and other bullshit in there?
Yeah.
and and share what was the outcome of all that?
Yeah. I mean, to the extreme, I have an example that I've shared before, and there was a point in time a couple years ago where it was like the vape gate, like you guys remember,
Yeah.
where people were cutting the distillate with vitamin E acetate, and when you smoke like this cart, it turns into vapor, but then after it cools down, it coagulates in your lungs. And a lot of times we'll have, like, once that became prevalent just nationwide, people were calling, the lab, being like, oh my gosh, like my son, he's a star athlete, but he's on a respirator now. Like, I don't know what's going on, but he like, we found this, like, this weed vape. Like, what is it? Can you test it? And unfortunately, we weren't able to test all of them because it would cross state lines and it would technically be illegal. And we're just like, we don't
Got
care
it.
how you get it to
Wait,
us.
wait, you can't send product to different states?
No. Well, apparently you can send like THCA and Delta 8
but that's
across
that's
state
hemp. That
lines.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah.
That's hemp.
Yeah, but no, just like, straight regular weed. No.
Cool.
So we weren't able to do it, but we actually had an instance where, this woman, her daughter had died, and the only thing that was on her was this vape cartridge. She didn't have any ailments or illnesses that would lead to this just sudden death. And
Damn, that must be scary as hell.
oh my gosh, this whole thing, like, it took like maybe a month going back and forth with the mother who's trying to get answers, like, what happened to my daughter? And she was working with the coroner, and I was like, listen, like, I could tell you, I can educate everything I can over the phone, but at the end of the day, like, we need the product to test it. And I don't know if you have someone that can get it to California, but the only way we can accept it is if it comes from California, or if you guys are willing to send it and we don't know anything. And eventually the coroner's like, screw it. Like, we're going to call this a test sample, and then we're going to send it over. And so we did test it. And what was marketed is, I think, like, 80% THC, like this high THC at the time.
Oh, it still had like they sent over the whole packaging.
The packaging, there was like maybe like, I think like 3 cartridges in there. And and it was actually it was a big pack. That's how you know it was from the traditional market, is because it was like a big pack of carts with like really gaudy like designs and writing. And we had tested it, and it was, oh my gosh, I think it was something ridiculous, like, I don't know, 12%, 3% THC, I forget, but it was nowhere near the THC limit. But then it was over, hundreds of times over the limits of different types of pesticides and heavy metals and solvents
What
that,
state was this?
oh
Do you
gosh,
remember?
it was somewhere in the South.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was somewhere in the South. And they did not have safe access to cannabis at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was heartbreaking. And like during that time we were doing this like investigation with them, there were times where like me and like, my boss, we would cry because this shit was really sad. Like someone lost their daughter. She just got into college. And then she just drops dead one day. So I don't know what happened to the case after that. It was out of
Mhm.
our hands, but we gave her these answers, and we don't know if it was conclusive to it or not. But that's been an extreme thing. When I lived in Georgia, I worked at a restaurant, and all the servers smoke weed. And one of them, he was like 17, and he was talking about how like his classmates make vape carts, and I was like, don't you smoke that? I'm like, I come from testing, and I just, was like,
Mama Angie.
exactly, just mama Angieing it up. I was like, you don't know the solvents for the pesticides, and I was going ham. And he was like, oh man, Angie, like one of the kids like was smoking a vape cart in the back of class, and he just broke out in a seizure. And I was
Oh,
like,
shit.
oh my gosh. Like, granted, it's not something that we test, but like there's a lot of these correlations between like these like extreme health scenarios and like illicit cartridges, illicit vapes, and
Mhm.
things like that, homemade shit. And we see it a lot of the time too, like if we're just kind of picking stuff up off the shelves, and just to see like, oh, this is like really high in heavy metals, or oh, it says that it's like 90% delta 8, but really it's not. So it's just that it's below the 0.3% delta 9 THC limit, and they could say whatever they want because the regulations are so loose when it comes to like hemp.
So do you typically see like these crazy like numbers when it comes to like the vape cartridges and those types of products versus obviously like the actual plant?
It's tough, because the nature of flower is it's not homogenous, right? Like we said
What does
earlier.
that mean? What does that mean?
So like when you pick from different parts of the plant, you're gonna have different results of like potency, how much THC.
So the THC at the top isn't it the same THC at the bottom, essentially?
Yeah, typically things at the top, like the main cola, the big juicy buds, those are gonna typically test higher in THC and higher in terpenes, than like the bottom of the plant that's shaded. And so a lot of times in testing, we run into this issue where, okay, someone brings in like a 3-gram bud, and it's like the main coal's the juiciest, most beautiful bud.
Yeah.
And they're like, test it. I'm going to run it for compliance. And then I test it, and I'm like, wow, that's hardcore. It's like 32%. Like, way to go. And then they're going to submit for compliance. And depending on how big the batch size is that they're going to compliance test,
Sure.
determines how much we take to test. So if they've got like, let's say, I don't know,
10 pounds.
10-pound batch, right? That one little nug, that 3-gram nug that you gave me, is supposed to represent that entire 10-pound batch? Absolutely freaking not. And so then we'll see from that 32% R&D, you'll start to see like 25%, 22%.
And I think it also like depends on when you test it.
Yeah.
Right? Like with the flower, at least with the plant, because and I know this one by experience because I was running like a processing facility, and my like this is my first time doing it, and my ass thought like, oh, this is fresh out of harvest. Let's plant this, like
Yeah.
let's send this into testing. And it came back like with low percentage, high on like moisture and all this shit. And I was like, I mean, it made sense because it's just fresh out of harvest. It still didn't allow itself to properly cure and air itself out and all of that. And so that also plays a role into like
Testing.
that time
Mhm.
frame window of testing your flower, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's like that sweet spot that you guys might know better than I do of when it's cured to actually test it. Because if it's too fresh or it's too old, you're gonna see lower results. And a lot of times when it comes to potency degradation, it's storage conditions too.
What
So
does potency degradation mean?
so potency degradation is basically the you'll start to see the potency numbers lower. So degradation typically happens when the storage conditions aren't right. Like if they're putting this somewhere hot and like it's exposed to too much light, and it's old. So a lot of times you'll see the potency like numbers degrade over time. Yeah.
Cool.
Wouldn't
Thank you
that
for the
naturally
clarification.
happen though? Because it's a plant, like it was once a living plant, right? And naturally, isn't that just
It's
in
agriculture.
general?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an agricultural item, right? Product.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's gonna happen
Yeah.
regardless, right? Like even if at the time of testing, especially now, right, with the regulations and everything, um, you put something into testing, like that example you just gave, right? The 10 pounds, you grabbed what you needed to grab. Test results came at, let's say, 26%. You package it up. By the time it hits the shop and the retail, let's say a consumer then
Takes it and
takes
tests
it
it.
and then gets it tested.
Yeah.
They're gonna have different.
What's the
results.
likelihood of those results from the original gonna
It's
match?
yeah, it's pretty unlikely that they'll match, especially like you don't know how the retailer's storing it too.
Because if it's stored under light, if it's stored
Mm-hmm.
in the back in a cool place, yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of factors that
There's
go
a lot
into
of
it.
factors, and you think of things like terpenes are so volatile. I think the moment when you pick the plant to packaging, you're already losing some terpenes as well. So it's like timing is of the essence when it comes to like cannabis testing. I mean, just in the cannabis business in general.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we're starting to see a lot of retailers accept smaller batch products so that they can go through them faster and get the essentially the freshest.
Yeah, because you don't want
Yeah.
old packaging or old products sitting on your shelves because no one's gonna want to buy that. No one really wants to buy weed that's older than like 3 months.
Mhm.
Honestly,
Yeah, but yeah. So when you think of, like, let's say federal legalization, would you say that testing plays a big role in making federal legalization happen with, like, being able, since you guys are collecting all this data, I'm assuming you're collecting all this data of like different products. Like, is that a conversation that happens in your meetings of like, us as a lab? We're like, we could be essentially the forefront of federal legalization.
That's a good question. I think that testing really does play a pivotal part in, the grand scheme of federal legalization. I think it should be standardized, but it's tough when we are balancing business and science and
it's a good way to put that.
Yeah.
Balancing business and
yeah,
science.
it is tough. People, what they want is they're like, listen, I want like the highest potency, I want this, that, and the other. And we're just like, our science can only do so much. Like, we're just telling you the facts. But as far
Stop getting mad at us because your product sucks.
and it's tough because like a lot of different labs, they have different practices and different methodology when it comes to testing different products and different assays or like different tests, right? Like
Yeah.
we might all do our microbial testing differently to test for different molds. There's what one lab might test as safe, another lab will be like, no, that's unsafe per my research, per
Different
our studies.
standards, yeah.
Exactly.
Or like SOPs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not something that one lab can say, hey, we could be at the forefront of this. This is really a buy-in from all the labs. You need a group and you need buy-in from everyone, because how can anyone say they're right when we all have different ways to get to the
methods
answer?
to get the
Yeah,
results,
exactly.
yeah. No, I think that's a great point. And I mean, that's how we kind of got to the flower standardization, is like everyone was like, yo, this is an issue that you're
Wait, what
seeing.
is this flower standardization thing you're talking about?
So, Angie, do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I had said earlier, different labs have different methods when it comes to getting the results that they get. And what we've been seeing over the last couple of years is Potency has really been at the forefront of selling cannabis. Everyone wants the highest potency so that they could sell the highest potency to the most people.
Mm.
Even to consumers, it's being marketed as the highest potency is the best flower, which is such a farce. Um,
Yeah, I remember back then, like
You never
these,
even asked
know
me.
like
what
the
you were
highest
smoking, yeah.
back in 2019, 2020, the highest percentage was like if you saw anything past 28%, people are blowing like they're like, "What? We got a 28%er? Let's package this up and hurry up and sell." And now like you can't find a 28%er like anywhere. Like it's so anything
So,
over than
so
that.
what year was that 20 when you
That's
found the
like
20? Well, you said 2019.
2019,
So in
2020.
2021, I found a weed that said it was 41% THC.
Oh,
So that's how
yeah.
crazy that jump went. It went from
Mhm.
28 being fire to now they're supposedly getting 41%. And I don't want to call out the brand, but
Yeah.
No, but
so
I've
that's
always
the issue. That's kind of like the root of the problem.
I've always thought that was a crazy like thing. Like there's no way that at least for me, I'm gonna speak for myself. My opinion. I don't think it's crazy. Like people didn't just figure out a solution on the cultivation level to say, I'm gonna do this, and by doing this is gonna jump the THC percentage 6-7 points.
Yeah, I had someone say that their weed was like 45%. And I was like, is that before or after standardization? He was like, before. And basically, with standardization, the Department of Cannabis Control was like, hey, all you labs, you're all going to do the same exact method, the way we said it. And so now, what we did an internal study and we had like a bunch of flour. We sent it out to different labs just to see like how far the numbers are in between, which before we would see over like, you know, a 20% disparity
Mhm.
between results. What one person is like, hey, this is 20%. Someone's like, well, I see it as 32. You know, now we're seeing like, okay, everyone's kind of in the mid 20s, the higher 20s. We're all really close together. And that was exciting for me to see. I was like, okay, like less BS. Because really, a lot of these numbers that we're seeing or that we saw were inflated. And it's essentially
sure.
lying to the consumer at
Yeah.
the end of the day.
And so, and I would always get into this with like, whose fault was it, right? Like, is it because I remember like the biggest like argument was the sales team will come back and say, well, the buyers aren't taking it because it's a low percentage. The buyers aren't going to take it if we put something into testing and we got the results back and this is a 22%. We're like, fuck, this is gonna be a paperweight because buyers aren't gonna buy this shit, or we're gonna have to lower the price on this product because it's 22% versus the 26% versus the now 32%.
And that's very real. Like buyers will turn you away if you don't have a percentage that consumers will buy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big issue when it comes to like business in general. But I have a question because as from my experience in the lab, I understand there are some key points, and I want to just give a little opportunity to our viewers who are looking to get into this as an entrepreneurial experience.
Yeah.
Why is it important to have a partnership with your lab? You've mentioned time is of the essence. So we're talking about flower testing. We're talking about distillate testing. So if I have my company and I have a vape and I need it turned around in what's 48 hours
yeah.
is like a rush.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it important to have a relationship with your testing lab?
Oh my gosh. I mean, there are so many different factors. Really, you just want to know that your testing lab will take care of you and will do everything that they say they will. Because a lot of the time, I think we throw the word partnership around pretty loosey goosey. It doesn't really mean anything, it's weightless. But, you know, you want someone who really embodies partnership. Like, hey, if I say you're going to have your results in 48 hours, I will get it to you in 48 hours. If I understand the state of your business is not doing great, I'm going to help you with some discounts to be able to compensate. But maybe we need to collaborate on some type of like, you know, event, sponsorship, whatever it may be, collaboration to work together to grow.
To make everyone win.
There's so many people all these labs, like all of us work with.
Mm-hmm.
And with us, the tough thing is like collections and, you know, and how well it is to work with some people. Some people are really hard to work with. They're
Yeah.
just jerks. And then other people, they say, I'll pay you, I'll pay you, I'll pay you. And then 60 days later, never hear from them again. So the partnerships are important because the lab is essentially the gatekeeper between you and the retailer, or like, you know, the distros, the brands, and the retailer.
If the lab doesn't approve of your product or it doesn't pass, you're not getting it to the stores, and you're losing out on a lot of money.
Yeah, we've had to turn down businesses just because they were just people with bad business practice. It's like we don't want the headache.
Yeah, that's
makes
very
sense.
true.
Yeah.
Very true.
And so as you say that, you know, and your role with Encore Labs, you're the sales manager, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you never really only do sales.
Well,
Like that sales role accompanies way
No,
more
but-
than week.
but I guess what I was gonna ask or get into is like, what is a sales role with a lab? What does that actually look like?
Mhm.
Because for me, when you first think of a lab, and you touched on it in the beginning, right, with the whole interview process was, you know, when I think of a lab, I think of just scientists. I think
Mhm.
of like a legit lab. I never would have thought like there's cells that is attached to this. So what does that look like on like with your day-to-day role? Like how is cells even incorporated into this role?
testing.
Yeah.